sound going, then I'll just have to repeat. We're good? We're good. Okay. So if you are joining online, you can text questions to the sermon text number, which is 937 971 2017. And I'll repeat that again a little bit later on. You'll have an opportunity to text those questions in, but if you'll just give me an opportunity to share some of the background to this, then maybe those questions will be answered. So, there's been a number of ways I think that the Lord has been guiding our paths, but primarily, there's a couple primary ones. One of the big ones, really the big one, is I think it was probably about 6 years ago, the Lord began to burden our hearts about a segment of the church, not our church, but the church, that we just felt was being extremely underserved, and maybe even worse than underserved, maybe just completely neglected. And that is a group of people that find themselves in a church that is dying. It's aging out. And maybe over a period of years, it's continued to dwindle down to the point where they can't hire a pastor in because they just don't have enough resources. They may get to a point where they don't have enough money to keep the lights on. I'm looking at Harry Burchell because Harry served one of those churches that closed about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. And it's very, very difficult because oftentimes what will happen is those churches, they don't have very many options. And it may be, there may be reasons why that church has dwindled. Maybe one of the reasons is the pastor stayed too long. And they just wanted to keep going and going before, they really weren't able to do it, but because they didn't want to leave, it just kept dwindling down. And when a church gets to that point, their options are very limited. The options that we typically will hear is that we come alongside those churches and we say, we can help you revitalize. We'll connect you with another church, and then we'll bring some of the people from that church in, and we'll revitalize you. Or the other option that we give to those churches is, we have a group that is planting a new church. They would love to plant a church in this area. Can we use your resources in your building to plant a new church? Those are wonderful options from a kingdom standpoint because it's a way to pass on the baton to the next younger generations. But oftentimes what happens is the people who are in that church really know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is there's going to be a group of new people come in, and the culture of our church is never going to be the same. It's going to be so different that we're going to feel like we don't belong. And honestly, the church family that's coming in and revitalizing or replanting is not thinking about them. They're thinking about a whole different group of people. And so what happens is the people that were there become more and more marginalized, and they feel like no one cares for my soul. And that's haunted me. Because the statistic is there's about 35 churches per week that shut down, many of them in that category. Now, sometimes those people say, okay, well, I'll just watch David Jeremiah on TV, and that's a wonderful option. But after a while, they realize they're just watching, they're just spectating, and it's not really for them. But yet there's no place for them, and nobody seems to really be interested in them. I told Don that I was going to quote him today. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and he said that oftentimes when he was in the military and serving in like an Asian country, he would spend a lot of time in that Asian culture, and then when he would come back to the States, he would be absolutely shocked with how we treat our elderly people versus how other cultures treat their elderly people. In other cultures, they really revere those who have that wisdom and the experience. And in our culture, it seems like when you get in that category, we really just want you to go somewhere else so that we don't have to worry about you and we can do our own thing. And that really has hurt, partly because I hear from these people. I have friends in different parts of the country where there's not any options for them. There's not another good church for them to go. And I've had people not too far from us that have said, can you just tell us someone who will come and preach to us? We're just a small group and we can't even find anybody to preach to us. I heard a quote a long time ago, and this quote it's attributed to Eugene Peterson. I think whether he may be the right one who did it. But the quote kind of goes in two different ways, and you may have heard it one way or the other way, but it's basically this, that the Christian life is a long walk in the same direction. The other way it sometimes goes is it's a long walk in the same obedience. But that is a wonderful metaphor. It's a metaphor that if you think about these particular people, they've been walking with the Lord on a long walk for decades. And now all of a sudden, that walk becomes more difficult, and there's no way for them to continue it because people are saying, we just want your keys, we want your assets, but we don't want to walk the walk with you anymore. You're fine if you want to go do that somewhere else, but we're going to walk in a different way. And those people are just not able to make that kind of a shift. And so they just kind of, I don't know what they're doing, honestly. I don't know what they're doing. But I felt like, okay, it's not a matter of just, if I retire or resign, I can go and pastor one of those little churches, because if there's 35 of them that are going to close their doors every week, it's like a drop in the bucket. And so I started praying years ago about that, and it seemed like there was a way maybe that the Lord was putting in my heart to serve them and to care for them, at least in a way. So not quite 3 years ago, it'll be 3 years in June, I filed paperwork and paid the fee and set up an LLC that I called Long Walk Worship Ministries. And my concept of this was there would be something that I could do to help those people continue their long walk. So the thought that came to me is that I have sermon manuscripts. Some of you have seen the notebooks in room 101. It's a wall full of manuscripts of notes of sermons that I've preached in the past, most of which have the handouts that you have every week, and often the questions on the back. And I thought, that may be something that I can make available to these people. Now, technically, they could watch our live stream, but again, it would be spectating. And I thought, what if I create this Long Walk Worship Ministries and I begin recording my messages, but I look directly at the camera. So when they play that video, it's not me looking all over at everybody else. It's me looking eye to eye with them and me speaking to those people directly. I thought, okay, that's one way to do it. And then when I find these people, I'll give them a notebook like we have, and I'll send them the sermon note handouts. And then Sarah and our girls who are musically gifted, we can make a video for them that will have music so that they can worship with music. And, we do this sermon text question thing every now and then. Well, maybe there's a way for us to have an opportunity to answer their Bible questions. They may not be tech savvy enough to do sermon text questions, but they can probably phone their questions or write them in and snail mail them or email them to me. And then maybe once in a month, I can take those questions and I can answer them. I wouldn't be present in their presence, but it would be something that would be for them. And then because they know that I'm caring for them, I could, offer them some pastoral coaching or counseling that I could do over Zoom or over the phone and help those people make some decisions. And instead of some outside group saying, we'll come in and we'll take over, just pass over the baton, pass over your keys. Maybe if I come alongside them and give them an option, I can still speak truth to them and say, you know what? You don't have to have that building. That could be used by another group. But it won't be coming from someone on the outside who's just wanting the keys. It'll be someone who's caring for them and helping them to see this is something that could be used for the kingdom. So that was my idea. 3 years ago, I set up this LLC and I thought, I'm going to buy some video equipment and teach myself how to do this thing. And then I will start recording sermons. And I'll put a website together, and I'll get this thing, I'll ramp up into this ministry so that when the time comes, I can just go from here to there. Other than doing the paperwork and writing a check for $50 to the state of Ohio, I've done nothing because I have no time. You know, I thought, okay, well, I'll just re-preach the sermon I did on Sunday. I can't do it. I'm too wiped out after 2 sermons on Sunday morning to do it on Sunday afternoon. And then by the time Monday comes, forget it, because it's off and running for everything else that's going on. And there's just not any margin for me to have ramped up into that ministry. And yet, that burden has continued on. And so the Lord has brought some other things into our lives that have helped us to recognize a few things. And one of them is, I'm not an old man, but I do feel that my energy levels and my stamina are not what they used to be. I mentioned this morning, and I'll mention it again tonight, I am so excited about the future here. This community is growing. There's all kinds of new people coming. This is the church they need to come to. You all are their church family. And I just feel like the Lord's got so much fruit in the future. But I also know that my ability to serve in that way is diminishing with my energy and my stamina diminishing. And at the same time, I'm also thinking that if I'm ever going to be able to start this other ministry, this long walk ministry, I can't ramp up into it. I have to jump into it. And if I don't jump now, I won't have enough gas in the tank to do it. So I recognize that our health requires that I'm going to have to make some adjustments anyway, but this ministry burden and the health considerations are 2 ways that has started to come together. We've been through recently a process where we were saying, Lord, do you want us to do a building? Is this what you want us to do? And legitimately, I felt like if that's what the Lord wanted us to do, I would not have ever considered doing anything different. It would have been unethical for me to leave in the middle of a process like that. I would have been here to see it through. And so this is not a decision because that didn't turn out. So it's not like me saying I'm taking my toys and going somewhere else. It's not that at all. It's like that was just one more thing that the Lord said, no, you don't have to do that. That's not what I want for the church right now. And so that was kind of another way that the light was able to turn green. And kind of combined with all of this, Sarah and I have known that just given the demands of our lives, we would have to downsize. And so downsizing, one of the major things about downsizing is you have to go from the house that you're in now to a smaller house. And you have to get rid of the stuff you have now so that it fits in a smaller house. And we knew that day was coming. We needed to do it sooner rather than later. But that if we did that, it would necessitate a big change. And we knew that a downsize could potentially mean that we would have to move to a different location. One of the options might have been to go back to the area where Sarah's family is from. But the Lord just kept in different ways, speaking to us, we'd hear one thing in this ear and another thing in this ear, and we'd see something with this eye and another thing with that eye, and it was all kind of moving in this direction. And many of you probably have been, I know, we've heard you say it. Well, now that Hillary and Roger have moved down to Gulf Shores, how long is it going to take you to get down there? And frankly, that was part of it too. Our family would be part of this ministry, and in order to do this kind of ministry, we would need to be together. And so the way all of that kind of is fitting out, it just became really, really evident to Sarah and I that the time was now. The church is in such an amazing spot. This is, it really is something. What God has done here and what he's doing. If you put yourself in my shoes, wouldn't you want that to be the case? Instead of the church being in a hurtful place, and now I've got to leave, the fact that the church is in such a wonderful spot, it fills me with joy to know that even if it's not me that God wants to be a part of the fruit and the joy that's coming, that he's still going to do something amazing here. And there's a joy that I have knowing that. Another way that the Lord's brought a number of things together is he has assembled a ministry team here and a leadership team. Many of you are in that leadership team that is just unbelievably exceptional. There's a spirit here, there's a joy here, there's a unity here, there's a love here. And among the staff, it's there. It's not like a situation where there's going to be a whole lot of infighting now all of a sudden. There's going to be a cohesion here. And I know all of you're gifted, you're mature, and you're ready. Now some of you are going to have to kind of like move up and be willing to do a little bit more. But that's a really, really good and healthy thing. So when I look at all of those things and I see how the Lord has really positioned us well right now, any transition, now would be a really nice time to do it. I mean, not a nice time, but probably a good time to do it. So when we prayed through all of that, the Lord just did line everything up, and then in a couple very specific ways that are a little more personal for us and a little bit hard to describe, because oftentimes when the Lord has done something in our life, it's been really subjective. And if you asked us to like logically explain everything, we couldn't. But we just know that the Lord is leading us in that direction. And when he gives you a green light, you have to go. And so all of those things really started to converge. And so we just knew it was the right thing. And then, so all that to say, when we came to that conclusion, we wanted to tell all of you, but we did not want to do it too soon. We've just gone through a 65th church anniversary. We didn't want to honk that up. And then following that was Palm Sunday, Good Friday, Easter. We did not want to mess with those. But neither did we want to keep dragging it out, because we wanted to give you an opportunity to deal with that. And so we thought, well, we need to give you time to think through it. And really, we want to be here it's selfish. Just want to make it to 20 years. Just celebrate that anniversary. So that seemed to be how all of those things were converging. I'm going to tell you a little story about one other little piece to this whole thing. And then I think what I'm going to do is just let you ask questions. But so 20 years ago, when the Lord first called us here, the church had been through some tough times. And I'm looking at some of you who are here, and because you were dealing with it. The church had dwindled down. It had had that tornado that you all saw in the year 2000. It wiped the building out. They built this building, but they built it with a huge amount of faith and a huge amount of debt. You know, the the capacity of this room was 4 times the size of the congregation at this time. And they were really worried that the doors were going to close, that they were going to be one of those statistics, that they were going to shut down. And when the Lord called us here, it was just an amazing opportunity, because the church family here said, we will follow your leadership. We don't want to die, so would you pastor us? We'll follow you. And that was so sweet. It was just so, so sweet to be in a place where they wanted pastoral leadership and they wanted to see the Lord work. And he did. Oh my goodness, he did. But I think this is true of a lot of churches. So here's my story. I think a lot of churches, they just want the pastor. You lead and we'll follow. And it's almost like you're Moses. You go up on Mount Sinai, and then you come back down with the blueprints to the tabernacle, and then we'll build it. Or you come back down with the stone tablets, and then we'll know what to do. And a lot of churches really look to their pastor to be like Moses, who hears directly from God. Now, I understand that, and I think at least for that chapter in our church's life, that was a really important thing, that the church was looking to have a pastor lead them forward. But I also think it's a healthier way for the church to own the vision. And it's not just coming from one guy or maybe from a small group of people, but that as a church, you know who you are, and you know the ministry that God has given, and you know the vision of where the church is going. And you're not just looking to somebody to cast the vision for all of you as if you don't hear from God. It's something that I think all of us need as a church family to own our own mission and our own vision. And I tell you that story because years ago, Pastor James started doing this refocus process, and he got certified, and he was working with other churches. And he and I, even before he was on staff, they've been members but for a while, but I knew that that was something we needed to do, that we were at a point in our church's history where we needed to do a refocus as a way for us as a church to understand and embrace who God has made us to be, what the ministry is, what the vision is, what the mission is, and own that together. And that's what that refocus process is there to do, to help us to do. And so we laid plans a long time ago, really before the Lord converged all of this in Sarah and my life, to get that refocus process started. And so that is in the works. It'll be kicking off later on in the summer. But again, in terms of God's timing, what an awesome thing to go through in a transition period is to be able to take that time and work through those things, and then as a church family embrace that vision. And that, I think, will be a really key component to how the Lord opens up the doors for what he wants to do here in the future. I am an optimist. I admit to being an optimist in general, but I look at our church and I think there's so much good that's going to come. And I am so grateful for all of you. Thank you for the love that you showed us this morning. I hope that answered some of your questions about what this was about. This is not at all about our not doing a building program. It's not at all about a better option out there. This ministry that I described to you, I'm not a business starter. I don't know how to make this happen. And frankly, if I'm talking about serving people that are on a fixed income, I'm talking about asking them, if this helps you, can you help me? I don't know how that's going to work, but that's okay, because the strength of the burden that God has put on our hearts make us know that there have to be people out there. There have to be small groups out there, maybe even like retirement communities would take this and they would use that as the basis for their weekly worship setting. So that's the plan. That's the ministry prospectus, so to speak, is that we find those groups of people and we put in their hands, probably it's got to be low tech, right? Because of who we're talking about. So I'd probably give them an SD card. And if I've lost you there, maybe you need to talk to me afterwards. But I'd put the video on an SD card and it plugs into the back of your TV. And then it can happen at church if you have a TV, or it can happen in one of your homes. And that group of 20 or so people, they can gather together. They can watch that message. They can do the sermon note handouts. They can have lunch together afterwards and then do their discussion questions as a small group. And they can function and continue that long walk. I don't know how that's all going to play out, but I've got to jump into it. I've got to be able to be done here so that I can just hit that ground running and make those sermons and get the materials and then find those people and start helping them. All right, I've gone about 28 minutes, so what are your questions? Pastor Tim has a microphone, and if any of you have a question, I'll let you go first. I've already got three texts from online, some of which I may be able to answer without any problem, but does anybody in here have a question that you want to ask? All right, I'll just go to this one. This may prompt you. Actually, the same person sent in 5 questions, so... This is the first one. It's pretty easy. Oh, so for those of you online, I'm sorry, I told you I was going to repeat the number, so let me repeat the number. It is 937, and you have to use the 937. If you text 937 971 2017. So that's 937 971 2017. Those will come into my phone, and they are anonymous. So the question is, was your decision influenced by the building project not getting approved? And the answer is not yes, but no. It wasn't like we were upset, but it was just one of those things that if that had gone to a yes and God did provide for that, then we would have stayed longer. So in a way, I guess the answer is yes, it did. Will there be an opportunity for the congregation to give input on the pastoral search and vision for the future? So the answer to that is yes. Our Constitution does describe the process that's involved. And so the process that is involved would be a search committee would be created. And so let me just talk about that. That's ultimately what is going to happen. But oftentimes when a church is looking for a pastor, and they've had someone who's been there a long time, it's not a bad thing to just take a step back and have a transitional period of time without the pressure of having to find the replacement right away. Because if the replacement comes in too fast, that transition didn't happen maybe, and it can put the next person in a position where it doesn't take off quite so well. So even though our Constitution does say that a search committee will be created, and if I'm not mistaken, it's created by like 9 people, I think, maybe a little bit more, but I think it's 9 from the congregation. One of them would be a deacon, an active serving deacon. But that would be an elected committee, and they would be then tasked to do the search process and bring a candidate one at a time. But in the meantime, we have this refocus process that is going to take place, which I think will be really helpful in the transition. And there'll be some other things that'll be put in place. So as we go forward, there won't be like any. Honestly, I don't think anything is going to fall through the cracks. I think that our deacons, I was able to have a meeting with the deacons yesterday. I know that they're thinking in terms of how to better care for the church family and how to expand in that area. And we've had a conversation with our pastoral team, which will continue on over the next several months. So I'm very confident that as all of you step up and are using your gifts, that those things will be well covered. who will be in charge of running the church during the transition period. So let me just kind of explain that a little bit. I know that in a lot of churches, maybe not a lot, but in some churches, there's kind of like the pastor is the CEO as the model. And that's not really how we are. We're a congregationally led church. And yes, you allow the pastors, me included, to lead. And so a lot of what we do, you are looking to us to kind of be your leaders, and that is wise. That's biblical. But we make those decisions congregationally. And in terms of running the church, those day-to-day decisions we often make collegially as a team. And there's, like I've said, there's just such a sweet spirit on our team that that's not necessarily an issue. Oftentimes we'll talk about something, and if it's not a decision that has to come back to the congregation, we'll talk it over, and usually we'll come to a consensus kind of a decision. So it's, we all hear from each other, and it's like, oh, okay, well, now we know where we're to go because it's a consensus. There are times when we have a staff meeting where at the end of that discussion, we haven't reached a consensus. It's kind of heading in one direction, and I'm usually the one that says, okay, let's do it this way. And the team says, okay, great, we're behind you. So we're figuring that out, and most likely, if things are happening day to day here on site, Pastor Tim, who is here more than any of the rest of us, would be the one that is logically going to make those day-to-day kind of things. If it's kind of a higher level thing that would normally be done in a staff meeting, it'll be done collegially. But if somebody has to be the first among equals in that room, it'd probably be Bruce Traeger, because he has the longest history and finger on the pulse of the church. And that's oftentimes, if I have to make a decision like that, it's just based subjectively on what I think the pulse of the church family is. It's just kind of because I know you. So it's a good question, but really there's nobody in charge of running the church from that CEO kind of a standpoint. Here's one more. Are there any other staff besides Pastor Robert Walker planning to leave? It's a good question. And the answer is no. Although I did hear from Pastor Robert today that their vote was 209 to 2. Very strong. And so they have accepted that call. And that honestly, I'm excited for Robert and Abigail. I've talked with that pastor. I've dug into that church a little because I don't want anybody to leave and go someplace that I would not want them to go to. So I'm kind of like little parent mindset there, but I do think it'll be a really good thing for them, and I'm excited about that. But the answer to that question was no. All right, does anybody in here have a question? Yes, Kathy. Here comes a microphone.
Okay, we all don't want you to leave, but do you have a date when it'll be your last Sunday?
So I mentioned this morning that I would like to stay until the end of August. So that's 4 months. And all right, so one of you would be asking the question, are you going to be here, or are you going to move somewhere? Well, we're going to move south to Gulf Shores, Alabama, as you would expect. And there's more to that story. And the next question that you're asking, well, is Dan and Liv going to move too? Well, you'll have to ask them because I'm not sharing their news. You have to ask them. But clearly, let me just tell you something. For us to downsize is huge. If we were to downsize and stay in this area, but not be the pastor, it would kill us. Because we wouldn't be able to come to this church. It's not because we don't love you. It's because it would be wrong for us to stay when another pastor is coming in. It would just create a dynamic that the next pastor would have a very difficult time getting over. Because if I'm sitting in the back, everybody's going to turn around and look to see if I'm listening to the pastor or I agree with the pastor. And if there's any kind of a way that they're misreading my body language, it would not ever go well. And so for us to downsize and stay in the area would tear our hearts apart if we couldn't be here. Which, honestly, I said this morning, we're not going anywhere better because you all are the high water mark that we know. We know. So, yeah, that's part of it. And Kathy, to answer your question, that was one of the ways that the Lord lit a fire under us and put a deadline over our heads. We bought a house, or we didn't buy it yet, but we signed a contract on a house, and we weren't really planning to do it. We went down to visit them over spring break, and we thought if we were going to end up here, we better start looking at neighborhoods just to find out what part of this area, because we don't want to be right on the beach for a number of reasons. But, what part of the area can we find a spot to be in? And through a series of circumstances, we both just knew that we were to put a contract on this particular house. And as we were driving back, it's like, what in the world just happened? And then I realized if God didn't light a fire under us, we might not have ever wanted to make that call. But it's amazing when you have your name on a legal contract and it's going to cost you a lot of money, it just all of a sudden lights a fire under you. And so we're in the process of that happening. So even though we'll still be here, we'll have to put our house up for sale, and we'll have to have moving sales. And there's a lot involved in downsizing. But somebody once told me it was the best decision ever made to downsize. And we know that there's a lot of reasons for us to do that. Okay, Shirley Kane has her hand up. And as you're coming down to Shirley, there's 3 more here. Let me just see one more. Are you moving to Alabama? That was easy. Already answered it. Are you still going to be in our congregation? Already answered that one. Will the candidate search begin immediately, or will it begin after the summer? Well, I suspect it'll happen after a transition period, which may be until after the refocus process is done. It may be a little bit beyond that if the church decides a longer transition period would be good. But it could happen at any point in time, really. Okay, Shirley.
So, since you won't be in the pastorate, however, will you come and share occasionally as a visiting pastor? Is that possible?
Well, that is a lovely thought. And I would say that how do I want to put this? I want to put this carefully. I would not presume to just show up, but if the invitation were to be made, I would love that. That would be great. And honestly, one of the things is, all right, so let me just say this. Sarah and I have been on a number of mission trips. I've been on mission trips by myself. It doesn't matter wherever we've gone. We've left a piece of our heart there. And if you've been on a mission trip, you probably just resonate with that. You do something and you leave a piece of your heart there. And those mission trips were a week or 10 days. Multiply that by 20 years. So our heart is here. And we may be absent, but our heart is always going to be with you. And every Saturday night, as I'm praying through the sermon one last time on Saturday night, I always pray. I pray for, I have this list that I go through. I pray for all of the people that have ever served with me on staff, no matter where they are. I pray for a number of other pastors here in the area that I know are going to be preaching the next day. I pray over every place that we've ever been on a mission trip because our heart is there. And You all own a piece of our heart that's huge. So, Shirley, I don't know. I guess it's the ball is in your court is one way of putting it. But then on the other hand, I don't want to take advantage of that either. So I think it's really healthy to come back, but I wouldn't want to overstay and over. You know, it's kind of like fish and neighbors shouldn't stay around for longer than a couple days. So something like that. I can't remember what that statement was. Something like that. Any other questions? Yeah, Daniel. So the Refocus project, excellent question. So James could probably give a 2-sentence explanation, and I'll give you 30 seconds to do that, to get ready. But before he speaks, before he speaks, I'm giving you 30 seconds to think about what you're going to say. So Pastor Bruce held a meeting today for the life group leaders, and Pastor James was able to make that presentation in depth. So to have him do a 2-sentence summary isn't going to quite nail it. But we knew that what he did today in that meeting needed to be recorded. So we recorded it, and we will upload that to our church website so you could see the full presentation with the slides and all that. Now, that's kind of like, you'll hear what he says, and then you'll have access to that as soon as we get it uploaded. Should be later on this week sometime. But that will expand on what you're about to say, James. Go ahead.
Thank you, John. It's a 6-step process that helps churches refocus on the mission, to discover and agree on a common current reality, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there.
That's pretty good for 2 sentences, but I hope that left a lot of to be desired, that you will go and watch this video, because it really is it's a great process. It's a very detailed, very helpful, a lot of tools, a lot of ways to think through ministry. And, you know, a lot of you have placed a great deal of faith in me and in our other pastors, because you know we eat, breathe, sleep, drink, church 24/7. And so you know that, because that is so much of how God has wired us, that you look to us kind of in a Moses sort of way. But there is a great benefit in, as a church body, understand what's happening at those higher leadership levels, because we don't want you to feel like, well, why was that? What in the world was that all about? So this process actually, I mean, there'll be a group that goes through it and does a lot of legwork and a lot of research, but it'll be communicated over and over again at a lot of different levels. And hopefully what it'll do is it'll help all of us as a church family understand the vision, the mission, the ministry, the DNA of who the church is at a much broader perspective that will, I think, really encourage you about what God is doing. Do you have any other questions? Any question is fair game. Yes, Bill. Hang on, here comes Mike.
How will your new ministry be financed, and what part can Dayton Avenue play in it?
Pastor John, can you please restate the questions for those watching online?
I sure can. So Bill asked, how will this Long Walk ministry be financed? And how can Dayton Avenue help? That was the second part. Okay. So I think probably if this ministry is actually caring for people in that category, and they feel like it's a valuable ministry, I'm going to ask them if they could give $5 per person per week to offset the costs of that. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, because I know that many of them are going to be on a fixed income. And if it's a group of 20 people, that's not going to be that great of an income. But you know what? If it helps 20 people, it helps 20 people. But maybe those 20 people know a bunch of other people that used to be a part of this group, now move to Michigan or someplace godforsaken like that. But and they're in the same boat with another group, and maybe by word of mouth, there's another 20 people somewhere. And so now all of a sudden, if it's 20 people, it's not a lot. If it's 40 people, it's better. And maybe if that spreads, that will be it will be something that'll sustain us in this. But we're not jumping into this like we've never followed any of God's leading before because it makes financial sense. But He's enabled us to have enough equity once we sell our house to be able to get this started. And I think if it is going to meet a need, I think it'll be well received. And so that's how it's financed. The second part of your question is, how can Dayton Avenue be a part of that? And I think maybe the best way that you can be a part of it is maybe while you're sitting here, you're thinking to yourself, I know that back home in such and such a place, or I know them from here, or I was friends with this person over here that church just closed. And I think maybe a lot of you have those kind of contacts where you know who those people are. And maybe those are the people that are the ones that God wants us to start with. So, again, I don't know how all that's going to work. I do know that I'm going to have a certain amount of material ready to go. Because if I get 20 people waiting for my first sermon and I'm like, I don't have time to do it. I don't have time to do it. Wait till September, that wouldn't be good. But if maybe by the end of this year I have enough, pardon the expression, enough of a catalog of available sermons and materials that I can begin to get them out to people, that would be helpful. But at that point in time, it's going to have to be that kind of a thing. So I don't know if that helped you or not, but thank you. All right, I see Bob, and then I see Hannah up here after that.
You brought up a question in my mind. I want to know, what is the geographical area you hope to cover? Is there a limit in terms of where all this can go, or is it open?
So yeah, that's one of the things. It is not limited because I won't be having a physical presence in all of these places. So it could be all over the place. In fact, one of the families that were part of our church have moved to Spain. Some of you will know them. And they're finding themselves in a spot where there's not a really good church option for them to go to, but they've connected with other Christian families. Maybe it could serve them in Spain, So I don't think it's geographically. I'm kind of having a conversation with him. I haven't dumped all of this on him yet because I wanted to share with you first. But I think that this ministry could serve in a lot of ways. So let me kind of just. I'll try to encourage you by this, and I think maybe it'll help. It'll make some sense. I have shared this with a couple people who've been really close and have mentored me and walked alongside me. And when I shared this ministry just a couple weeks ago with someone, they got thinking about it, and then they called me back and they said your ministry will be to a modern-day diaspora. Now, that term may not mean a lot to you, but the word diaspora means dispersion. And if you study church history, the diaspora were the group of Christians who had to flee for their lives because of persecution. They may have been in Rome, they may have been in Jerusalem, but they had to disperse. And when they were dispersed, they found themselves out there, disconnected and kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And what this brother said to me is, this ministry could be a ministry to the modern day diaspora of people who have been kind of marginalized, and you're not part of this church culture anymore, but you're over here. And I think that if that is true, that diaspora is large. The diaspora is potentially hundreds of thousands of Christians who have walked a long walk, and they just need someone to care for them. Now let me just, I want to say this too. So, this is kind of all a bowl of spaghetti, and I apologize for that, but it's not my heart to just help people ride into the sunset. comfortably. I mean, I want to minister to them and I want to care for their soul, but I don't want it to be like, oh, this is great for us to just be really, really comfortable. I think that the way you understand this, because you have to listen to my sermons normally, but it kind of pushes and prods a little bit. And I think that if a group of 20 people find themselves watching this and being ministered to it, there's no reason they won't ask their neighbors to come and join them. And they might have grandkids or other family members that don't go to church that would join them for that. It doesn't have to be just a bunch of old people sitting in a room. It could be something that could grow and expand. And so even though this modern day diaspora would be kind of like the primary target audience, I really don't want it to be stuck there. I really don't want it to just be that. I want it to be something that can grow and be something. And I don't know how the Lord is going to work that all out, but I'm really hopeful that there's a reason why he put this burden. So, okay, it was Hannah. Yeah, Hannah.
I have two questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is kind of tagging along on the, what can Dayton Ave do for you? Would you be willing to consider yourself a missionary to these hurting churches so that we can put in a request to our mission board, or so that we can be your sending church and support you?
Thank you for that. The deacons asked a similar question yesterday. So I made a statement this morning that this is not a retirement because this is, we're not going to retire. I'm going to have to jump into this full time. And part of what I said this morning was it'll be like launching into the unknown because there's so many pieces that are unknown. The concern that I have, and I don't know how to work this out because it's just not my thing. I've just been a regular pastor. But when I set up that LLC, it's just an LLC. It's not a nonprofit. I actually signed up for a webinar yesterday about how to have a nonprofit. And at the end of 2.5 hours, I thought to myself, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know if I want to do it. Because there's all this paperwork that you have to do and forms that you have to fill out and all this kind of stuff. And that's a nightmare. Because I don't know how to do that. All I know is that I bought a camera and I figured out how to do some basic video editing. And I can do a message to that camera and I can edit it down and put my sermon text over it, and I can put it on an SD card and stick that in the mail with a bunch of handouts. I can do that. I'm not going to be filling out forms. So the whole concept of how do I do this, it's daunting to me. Even if somebody's, if I get a group of 20 and they're sending me $5 a person, now what do I do with it? I don't know. There's a whole lot of unknowns. So your question about missionary support raises a whole host of things. If it's not a nonprofit, how does that work? Because that's not typically what churches do. They want to work through a mission organization. Well, I don't know that this is a mission organization kind of thing. I think it's so different that it doesn't fit in any of those molds. So, Hannah, I'm just word vomiting your question to try to answer it. I don't know, and it scares me. But I have a couple months to begin to start to try to figure that out. And I know maybe some of you are going to come alongside and say, I know how to do that.
Since you said that you have been so busy that you haven't been able to focus on this at all, are there things that you can step back from that we can step up into as a church to give you some space to answer some of these questions and get a little bit started?
Thank you for that question. I'm just going to answer it as bluntly as I think I can. I think the next 4 months, there's a couple things that have to happen, and one is we have to downsize and sell our house. So whatever margin I do have is going to probably be in that category. And the other part of that is, selfishly, I want to be here for our 20th anniversary. But selfishly, I also have a couple things on my heart that I want to share. So I don't really want to give it up yet. But that's part of the answer. Another part of the answer actually is one of these questions that has come in, and it is, will your role be depleted over the next few months? Will more men be filling in the pulpit? Okay, so what has to happen in the next couple months is whatever transition machinery needs to be in place. I don't want it to just be like boom, 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 end of August, now it's yours. I want it to, whatever needs to happen to make some shifts, I need to step back so that those processes can step forward. And so that's going to be a part of what happens, and helping smooth out all of those things so it's not drastic and it doesn't like grind. So all that to say, thank you for your heart on that. I just feel like this is one of the reasons why we have to just jump into it. Just ramping up into it is not working, and I don't see it being able to work until I am clear-headed. Yes, Melissa.
As you think about the transition ahead, and this is a significant decision to bring in a new senior pastor, do you anticipate that the search for a new children's ministry director is going to be placed on hold until after we find a senior pastor, or is that still going to be going on simultaneously?
A really good question, Melissa. Thank you for asking it. So the answer is it's already in. I mean, we didn't know how today's vote was going to turn out, but we didn't want to like sit on our hands and do nothing either. And so we've had some conversations, and our staff has met. I know the Personnel Committee has begun to think through that process a little bit, assuming that the vote would be positive for Robert and Abigail, as it was. We've kind of laid out a few really tentative things that'll at least see us through the summer, but we know that search, that process to keep that ministry not just going on fumes, but to really, how can we resource it well so that it improves even? That is going to happen right away, and it couldn't happen until it was a clear yes for Robert and Abigail down there. But we didn't sit on our hands, and so Robert's been part of that discussion as well. So to answer your question, the children's ministry thing is way too vital to just say we're putting that on the back burner. We're going to work hard at it. So, got another one online here. Maybe you could use this in prisons and nursing homes. Okay, well, there's a lot of these things that I haven't even thought of yet. But yeah, nursing homes or retirement communities. I hadn't thought about prisons. But I know that there are some of you in this room that serve at what used to be Shawnee. Is it still Shawnee? I'm not sure what it's called. It is Shawnee State. So, but it's once a month, correct? So twice a month. So we've got a small team that goes and ministers to that nursing home. But how many nursing homes are in the area? And I know those program directors are constantly trying to get churches to do those things. And I know Harry does it in another place. And it's not easy for them. So maybe this could be packaged in a way that their program director could just put it in the TV and the people could gather. I don't know. There's probably a lot of options there that could happen. But again, it's kind of like, how do those contacts, because I'm not going to market on Facebook, right? It's just not how you do that. You got to like know people and talk to people and get the word out there. And so that's all part of the job that has to be done. I got another one here, but if you've got a question, let me know. Will pulpit supply be mostly from our pastoral staff? or designated interim? And if so, who? That's a pretty specific question. If so, who? We have talked a little bit about that and shared a little bit with the deacons about that. I think that our church is uniquely gifted with a lot of wonderful people who have the ability to fill the pulpit, and I have leaned heavily on them over the years. So to answer the who question, I think we're just going to let some more play out. I just spoke to the deacons yesterday about this. Like I said, I didn't want to mess up anybody's Easter. So this is still kind of fresh. A lot of the how is all of these pieces going to fit together, that's going to come out in the future. But I guess what I'm trying to do is answer that question with a great deal of confidence that the Lord has really gifted our church family, and the ones who will be filling the pulpit are probably going to be from here, and so they know who we are. It is 7:04, and I am more than happy to answer any other questions that you have. But I also want to respect the fact that you have come tonight again, and I want to let you have the wisdom or the freedom to go home, the wisdom to go home. Maybe, I don't know. But I will be here afterwards, and if you want to ask any personal questions, you can do that. Again, I want to thank John for live streaming tonight, and it will be on the church website. So if you have insomnia and troubles falling asleep, you can get on our church website and bring this back up, and hopefully it will help you fall asleep. But it will be out there because, honestly, everything that I've shared with you tonight, I want to share with anybody who asks. But if it's on tape, I won't have to do it another 150 times. If you can point them to that, it might answer a lot of their questions. Can I pray? Lord, we depend upon you. We depend upon your power, your strength, your hope. We depend upon you working in us and working through us. And Lord, I thank you again for our church family. I thank you for all the ways that you have blessed us here. I'm so grateful that you have allowed our paths to be involved and crossed and partnered together to serve you in this way. And Lord, we need you and we trust you that whatever your plans are for us, they're always going to be for our good and your glory. And so, would you please, in the days, the weeks, and the months ahead, just continue to shine your face upon us all. And may we see fruit and joy. May we see you do amazing things here in our midst. Lord, for all of the questions that we have that we can't really answer because we don't know the future, you do. So would you replace our fear, maybe anxiety, confusion? Would you fill those spaces in our hearts and in our lives with your presence and with your sufficiency? Because really, truly, you are our sufficiency. So I pray your highest blessing on our church family, and especially on each one who's here and who's watching. And Lord, for those who couldn't be here, I'm so grateful for all of the ones that you have brought together who have played such an important role in my life and in Sarah's life. And I pray your highest blessing on each one as we leave tonight. Thank you for who you are and for all you've done. And I pray this in Jesus' strong name. Amen. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you again for coming.